July 20th, 2021 meeting of Ag and Rural Affairs. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the May 18th meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions?
I move we approve them.
I'll second, sure.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next item is public appearances for non-agenda items. I've got one person interested registering for an item on the agenda. So, and you're for an item, okay. So we'll move on to agenda review. Wade, any changes? No. All right. Item 5A, DNR Managed Forest Tax Program Overview. I'll turn that over to Wade.
If I could just give a little bit of context. So I believe Roger might have brought up this as an issue that the committee might be interested in. And we do have Anna Healy. I don't know if folks know Anna, our city forester, but Anna is here to give us an overview of what's called MFL, and then certainly can discuss as the committee sees fit. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. May I share my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Can you see my presentation?
Not yet. We can
Did
see
it
you
come
though.
through? Okay. It should be a picture of a tree with titled Managed Forest Law.
No.
No.
Nope. Ah, shoot.
Anna, if you're able, I don't know if you're able to email it to me quickly. I could try it.
Okay. Let's see. I can probably do that.
Or if it's saved somewhere on the drive.
Oh, okay. Is it now? Is it coming through?
No. Well, wait, now there's something happening.
There.
Yes.
Okay. Yay. Okay. All right. Perfect. Can everyone see that
Yes.
and hear me?
Yes.
Hopefully. Okay, perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Wade. My name is Anna Healy. I am the urban forester and naturalist for the city of Fitchburg. It's my pleasure to talk to you guys today about managed forest law, what are the nuts and bolts of the law, how you can, basically what's required to even be consider enrolling and how you enroll. And then I'm going to move on to some landowner considerations that you may want to think about, not just in managed forest law, but just managing your forest generally speaking. And if anyone has any questions or needs clarification along the way, let me know. I'm happy to, don't worry about interrupting me. I'm happy to make any points of clarification along the way as needed. So just to get started, basically, MFL, just as a program overview, it's a tax program. It's people enrolled, landowners enrolled in MFL. They basically get a tax break for agreeing to manage their property sustainably for timber products. I mean, that's kind of the overview of the law. And what that means basically is, you have to be eligible to enroll in MFL. Not all landowners meet the criteria. And the minimum, these are the bare minimums. You have to have at least 20 acres of contiguous forest under the same ownership, or continuous acreage. That acreage has to be at least 80% forest cover, and it has to be growing. And that's kind of important right now because, and I'll show you some pictures, that's kind of important right now. If you have property that has dying trees on it, particularly dying ash trees, you may not be eligible. That may be a conversation with the DNR forester. But according to the law, it has to be growing. It can't be in a subdivision. It can't be tax delinquent. And if it's designated as open MFL, that means open to the public, it has to have access. It basically has to have a road going to it. And it cannot have, that 20 acres cannot have buildings or improvements. So those are the bare minimum basics to even be eligible to enroll in the program. And like I said before, in terms of 80% forest covered, this is a picture. This is in Fitchburg. This is what some people would consider woods. And there are some trees in this picture. But most of the green woody cover is invasive shrubs. It's honeysuckle. if this is what a property looks like, it probably is not eligible to be enrolled in managed forest law unless it would take quite a bit of management to get it to where it would need to be. And this is an example of another property where the trees are dying. And so it's, may or may not be eligible. So those are just two considerations. Now, to enroll, you have to choose open or closed, and there's a different tax break depending upon if you're open, which means open to the public for hunting, for hiking. Basically, if you're an open enrollment, the public can come explore your property and also hunt and take pictures and hike and do those sorts of things. If it's closed enrollment, that means it's private property, it's closed to the public, and kind of like a typical private property situation. And currently there's two different commitments for MFL. You're either committed for 25 years or 50 years. So it's a long range program, and it may cover the current generation and the next generation. So if folks are considering enrolling in MFL, I always tell them, hey, you might want to consider talking to the folks who it's a family situation, talk to your kids or whomever may have this property next, because it is a long range program. You are committing to, either 25 or 50 years, depending on what you choose. And basically, when you enroll with a management plan, and that sets a specific schedule for specific forestry activities to happen on your property. And landowners cannot enroll themselves. They have to be enrolled by a certified plan writer. So basically, a plan writer writes your plan and enrolls you in the plan or in the program. There is a time frame to keep in mind. If you would like to enroll in the program for the following year, your deadline is June 1. So basically, you would have to have been enrolled by June 1 to enroll in MFL for the 2022 tax year. Now we're July 20th. So if you enroll now, or start the process to be enrolled now, you would be enrolled starting January 1 of 2023. So there are some time considerations to think about. All right. So basically, the things, so I work for City of Fitchburg 24 hours a week as the urban forester and naturalist. The other 16 hours or so a week, I do private consulting. And I do work with a number of landowners who happen to be enrolled in MFL. And I'm going to talk about some of the considerations I think people should really think about if they're considering enrolling in MFL or if they are in the program. And the first thing I tell folks is really know your property. Know what your canopy tree species are and know what's regenerating. Know what the understory is. Are you regenerating invasive shrubs? Are you regenerating oak trees? Are you regenerating maple? What basically is going on? What's your current state of affairs? Because that will really determine what kind of management is possible on your property. And also think about, to do management, you need people and equipment to access your property. Really think about, well, what is the access like? Are there roads, is it easily accessible by road? Are there terrain issues to think about? Slopes, what areas, that kind of stuff. A lot of people who have really wet terrain and that can only be accessed when the ground is frozen have a really hard time getting their MFL mandatory practices accomplished because we don't often have cold enough winters to freeze those areas. So it's just something to consider. Like if you are going to require frozen ground, you might be a little bit limited. Sometimes we have frozen ground, and some winters we just don't. This past winter we had a lot of snow. It was on ground that wasn't frozen, so it was a little hard to access really wet areas. So that's just something to consider. The other thing I tell folks if they're considering MFL to really think about is the land use history of their property, because that will also really determine what is possible from a management perspective. For example, when the surveyors surveyed the state of Wisconsin in 1833, obviously a lot has changed since then, but primarily what they found was dry prairie. So this area, before there were a lot of houses here, this area was probably burned a lot and had basically dry prairie and not a ton of trees. So our old legacy trees are primarily bur oak or other fire adapted species, and trees that have come in since are trees that are more early successional trees, black cherry, box elder, ash, that sort of thing. And they may or may not make good timber species depending on the situation. So that's just another consideration people should think about, if they're thinking about enrolling in a program that's about managing property for timber. And this is an example since 1833, mostly, this is a 1970s picture of what now is McGaw Park. We had a lot of ag, as you're all familiar with, going on in Fitchburg. So we have a lot of old field succession, and a lot of that is invasive shrubs and early successional trees, which might take a lot of management to get to a forest that is something that you'd want to have in managed forest law. And I bring that up because it's something I think people don't always understand all the management that they're signing up for. And it's a big consideration. And this is, again, a picture from the 70s. This is what's now McGaw Park. And you can see the primary trees coming in are cherry trees, and the trees in the background are mostly oak. But at any rate, so another consideration is landowners should really know what their goals are and what they're hoping to achieve in whatever time frame they set up. And that's really a conversation that they should have with a forestry professional, just to say like, hey, my goal is, to do hunting here for myself and my kids and my grandkids or whatever, or to recreate or whatever it may be. Those are really important considerations to really communicate to anyone who may be writing an MFL plan for you, and especially the specific timeframes that you're looking at. For example, this is in Fitchburg. This is the oak savanna in front of the DNR property. This is basically an even-aged oak stand. It's managed quite well, but if this was an MFL, there'd be a fair bit of harvesting going on. So if this is what you want your property to look like, you may want to, think about if you fit into the program or not. The other thing to really consider are markets, forest markets. So here in Southwest Wisconsin, we don't really have a very good market for small diameter timber. Firewood, we have a firewood market, but the cost of getting firewood out of woods often is more expensive than what it's worth, depending on the situation. So just something to consider is if you have a lot of small diameter trees that need to be removed for timber stand improvement, that may be, it's good management to do, but it may be costly because we don't really have a lot of markets for that. We also don't really have a pulp market. So if you have, different pine species that typically would go for pulp, we don't have a great market for that. By the time you get out of the woods and truck it to a paper mill, you've already spent more money than what that material would bring. What that material is worth. We do have a good pallet market, so the right person could market some of that material for pallets, but that's not always the case. That said, black walnut is the most valuable timber tree east of the Mississippi, and that is one of our canopy trees here in the city of Fitchburg. So this is not far away. This is not in Fitchburg, but it's not far from Fitchburg. So this is, when I say I do forestry consulting, part of that is doing timber harvesting with draft horses. And this is a job we did last winter, and we brought out a fair bit of black walnut from this particular property. And I don't think that log is worth $2,000, but on this day, we did bring out a log that was that sold for $2,000. So there can be a lot of value in your woods, just depending upon what's there. And it may surprise you. You may think your pine trees are worth a lot of money, and they turn out not to be, and you may be shocked to find that your walnut's worth a lot more than you thought. So, and the other thing that landowners really need to think about when they're enrolling in MFL is what are their capabilities? MFL it's management. So what kind of management, how much management is the landowner capable of doing or willing to do? And what is their measure of success? That's a really key question I think people need to think about. For example, in this picture, this is an oak woodland. This is not far from Fitchburg either. It's not in Fitchburg, but we're taking out some red oak in this picture. And you can see we don't have tops laying everywhere. There's almost no residual stand damage. We have not damaged any of the other standing timber when we were doing our management. And those are things that you really need to think about going into a timber harvest or going into management. What do you want it to look like? If you don't want tops laying everywhere, you have to be able to articulate that in a contract. And if you don't want residual stand damage, you have to articulate that in a contract and have some kind of consequence in terms of if trees are damaged, XYZ will happen. And that's a real important thing to know upfront, because if you don't put in a contract, someone comes and does a harvest, leaves tops everywhere, beats up the trees that are standing there, you don't have a whole lot of recourse. So you really have to think about these things, before before you really put the management into place. And in MFL, a lot of this ends up being on the landowner unless they hire a consultant to help them. Basically, and that's where I get to the know your resources. Like the DNR does have a forestry assistance locator. It's a web page where you can type in county and you can choose whatever, kind of forester that you want. For example, these are the DNR foresters that are available to serve the city of Fitchburg. And I would suggest that if any residents of the city of Fitchburg are interested potentially in enrolling in MFL, they start by talking to their DNR forester. I know all three of these gentlemen, they're great guys, and they're very, very busy, but they would be, I think, more than happy to talk with folks about their properties. There also are a lot of other consultants that can help people. And I would just say good consultants are really busy as well. And if folks are, thinking about enrolling in MFL, they really have to get on certified plan writers, on their calendar well before that June 1 deadline. Like now would be a good time to talk to somebody if you want to get enrolled for 2023, just so they have time to do all the legwork to write a really good plan for someone. So, and then, and if you look at the city of Pittsburgh, a lot of big contiguous blocks of forest. Not really known for forestry here. We're more part of our city. That said, there are some beautiful chunks of forest here that would probably benefit from some management, and MFL may or may not be a good fit for those. And if anyone would like to talk to me about any of this moving forward, I'm happy to talk to whomever and answer questions, from my perspective, or try to lead you in the right direction. This is my contact information. I am in the office Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and would be happy to talk to anyone, about whether if MFL would be a good fit for them. And I guess in summary, I'd like to say like MFL is a great program. It does have some great tax benefits, but people just should really be just know what they're signing up for and be as proactive as possible with all the steps along the way to get the outcome that they really are interested in. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thanks, Anna. Can you give us just a brief overview of the tax benefits? We can kind of get a feel for why someone may want to enroll in this.
So I guess it really depends upon your situation, and if you go 25 years or 50, and if you go open or if you go closed. So there's different tax rates depending upon which of those things that you choose, and so I guess the answer is it would depend. It really does change depending upon what you're looking at doing. So I guess unfortunately I don't have those, like I can't really specifically say that unless I kind of know what the parcel number is and that kind of thing. A DNR forester might be able to get you some of those specific things if you really are interested to know, but they're going to ask you, would it be open or closed 25 years or 50? And so you'd have to know those things up front.
Right. So I think some of the issues that landowners have been having is that, the taxation of parcels as recreational when, they considered them to be agricultural. So I assume the point here is that this is a way that someone may achieve some other sort of tax status other than recreational if they are actively managing their land for forestry purposes. Is that basically the idea?
That's the idea, but you have to A, meet the criteria, and B, you have to do the management. And I think that the issue that I see sometimes is people don't understand what the management entails, and they don't understand what their property is going to look like afterwards or what it means, or they think that they can just not do it. And that's not the case. I mean, you really do have to do your management plan. And really, it's all in the implementation. If you have a really good consultant to help you, you can manage your property in the way that you see fit and fit into MFL. Great. If you kind of have a more passive attitude, it may work out or it may not. So I guess the upshot is if you think MFL is a good fit for you from a tax standpoint, I think you really do need to be pretty proactive and pretty active in knowing what you have, knowing what you want, and being able to articulate that really clearly so you end up with with what you're interested in having happen. Otherwise, if it's just open to interpretation, people are going to probably do the easiest and most efficient thing, which may or may not be what you really want to see happen, if that makes sense.
Yes, and one other question, you said that the minimum is 20 acres. Does it have to be all under one
Contiguous.
ownership, or if you have two adjacent woodlots that exceed 20,
No.
could that be eligible?
No, it has to be 20 contiguous under the same ownership.
Okay.
That was a recent change. It used to be 10, now it's 20.
Okay, thanks. Randy?
Yes, Anna, Anna, this is Randy Udell.
Hi there.
Hello. The 20 and, or the 20, 25 and 50-year sustainable management plan, is that a contract? I mean, if the heirs decide that they're not interested, or if the property's sold, is it a contract that's very binding? That is binding?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's the law. So if the property is sold, the MFL plan goes with it. If the kids inherit the property, the MFL plan goes with it. It doesn't go away just because the property changes ownership.
Okay, very good, thank you.
I got a question. Anna, Raj, am I on?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. To follow up with Randy, are you saying that this contract, you cannot opt out of it anytime
No.
during that 25 years?
No, you cannot. If you do, you have to pay all the back taxes.
That's it,
So that's
okay.
something that people don't always understand. They want to withdraw and they get the bill and they're like, ooh. Or sometimes people don't do their management and then they're in like, or they don't understand what they're supposed to have done and they have to do it. Unfortunately, I've helped some landowners who, for whatever reason, didn't really understand what the management was, and they ended up having to pay some financial penalties and then also have to pay for a lot of management to happen because they weren't following their plan.
Yeah,
So it's managed forest law. It's not very flexible and it is not really open to interpretation. And so if you sign up for it, you do get the tax break, but you are signing up for either 25 or 50 years and you have to do what you have to follow that plan. And there really isn't any, that's black and white. It's statute. So there's no real wiggle room, so to speak.
So to be clear, if a person does want to opt out for some reason, they can do that, but they pay the back taxes, is that correct?
They do, and I'm not sure if there's other penalties involved or not. It depends a little bit on the situation. But yeah, it's
Okay.
it's not. I don't want to say it's not easy to get out of it, but it can be expensive.
Yeah. One other thing, my experience has been with the 20 acres going into the program. Your tax benefit will probably run someplace around $1,200 to $1,400, depending on it here in Fitchburg, based on our our tax rates have been on our forest or our recreational forests. So that's kind of, I've been told that by a couple different people that I've worked with on this, that's pretty much in the ballpark that you can look at as far as a tax break. And that's quite substantial based on what we are getting taxed on this recreational forest.
Yeah, I mean, I think rec taxes are probably one of the highest, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but I would say, I understand people do enroll in MFL for the tax benefit, but there is management that goes with that, and that may or may not cost you money depending upon what you're willing to do. And you may have to end up paying for some management, particularly if your woods aren't in great shape to start with. So just realize it's not necessarily, it may not, well, you may save some money in taxes, you may have to pay for more money in management.
Yeah, but you can get out of it.
This is a state program, correct?
It is, yes, it is. It's in state statute.
So it's administered by the DNR then?
And it's administered by the DNR, yes. And the three foresters that I had put the slide up, they are the tax law people that cover Dane County and the city of Fitchburg. Where are we? And they would know, here we go. And they would have, they have more, I don't have real access to tax data, and they would more, so they could really talk to the numbers a little bit better than I could. But, I just, I can understand people, that recreation tax is substantial. I just hope that people understand what they're signing up for when they sign up for managed forest law, because it is managed and it is law. So,
Okay, George?
Is that $1,200 on approximate 20 acres?
Yeah, it's minimum 20 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So that's not per acre, that's.
No, that's
the
the- no, that's-
savings on, say, a
Right.
20 acre
That's,
parcel.
yeah,
Maybe your savings on a 40 acre parcel is double that. then.
it would be, yes, but on the minimum of 20 acres. That's been my involvement with the 20 acres. And so,
It gives people some sense, because there's a lot of cost involved in managing this too. There's the equipment, there's the time, and there's all
Yeah.
of that. If you're gonna do it yourself, if you got the time, that's one thing. If you gotta hire people to do it, boy, that money's gonna go real
Right.
fast.
I can say in my case, I did get signed up before the June deadline. And in my case, I have a large amount of honeysuckle. And I've been, to get in contact, and I've been trying to get in contact with Nicholas Coates, the individual you have up here. And he'll work with you, and I'm looking on a chemical spray program for it. And it appears to be something that is very manageable. And all I'm required to do is I've got to show a constant program that I'm going to have this honeysuckle program under control. It doesn't have to be done all in 1 year, but it's a program over time. You have to show that you're working with it. If that's correct, Anna, that's the way my program's been set up.
yeah, I mean, honeysuckle management is usually a big part of MFL, and typically that's a cut and treat in the winter. I mean, it's a ton of work, or a forestry mow. I mean, it's a ton of work to cut and treat it if you're willing to do. That's why I said, know your capabilities. If you have the time and energy to do it, awesome. You can hire someone to forestry mow. That typically is about minimum $75 an hour to forestry mow. But yeah, I mean, invasive shrubs are probably the biggest hurdle for folks in the city of Fitchburg, I would guess. So, and you're right, it doesn't have, it happens according to your plan. So if it's like within the first 5 years, you're gonna get honeysuckle under control, then you've got 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is to do that. But you do have to do it, is the caveat.
Yeah,
So there are really kind of two financial advantages to doing this. One is the tax, but the real purpose of this is to produce,
Timber,
better timber. Yeah,
yes,
more valuable
absolutely.
timber.
Absolutely, and yes, and that is, an industry knows that. An industry really, and the caveat to that is, if you have a mandatory harvest scheduled and the market is down, you still have to do it. So even if, like right now, timber markets are as good as they've been for a while, so it's a great time to harvest. Well, you can't move your harvest up just because you'll make more money. Conversely, like in 2008, when the markets were really low, people still had to harvest, even though they didn't make as much money. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, when your mandatory practice is up and it's time for you to do your harvest or whatever it happens to be, that's independent of the economy. So so just keep that in mind. You're not able to really manipulate it to take advantage of a good market or hold off in a bad market. You really do need to harvest when the management plan dictates.
So is that every certain number of years? Is it the same for everyone?
So it depends on the silviculture that's prescribed for your. It depends on the silviculture that's prescribed for your forest stand. The picture of me taking that oak log out of the woods, that was an 80-year rotation. So that log that I was taking out is, I think, about 80 years old, this log. And those trees in the background are not quite there yet. They are left to grow. They're pretty small. I don't know, they're 9-10-inch trees or whatever it happens to be. And because we were really careful, we didn't beat any of those up. They will all make it to the next rotation, which is probably 40, 50, maybe 60 years down the road, depending on the situation. So,
40, 40, 50, or 60 years old? Is that what you said?
yeah,
I mean, down the
depends on
road?
rotation.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends. And I think I'm trying to remember this project. I think we were doing a shelter wood. I can't remember, but at any rate, it depends a little bit on the silviculture that's prescribed. And it's really good to know, what that's going to look like, because a lot of oak regeneration involves a lot of really heavy management and leaving a lot of patch clear cuts, for example, which we've done. And some people like the look of that and some people don't. But that's the way you regenerate oak, is getting sunlight on the forest floor. And so that's kind of the, that's why I said, kind of know your woods, know where you're at. Because if you are like those trees in front of the DNR Service Center, they're ready to come down. If they were an MFL, they would be harvested. So you just have to kind of know where you're at rotation wise, and what the management is going to dictate that you do. And when rotation age comes, you got to take it out.
Okay, so Raj, in your case, as an example, what species are you managing for? And then are there other things besides the honeysuckle that you have to remove in order to achieve that?
There's some buckthorn. There was some buckthorn, not a great deal. But in my particular case, the honeysuckle is the primary one. And I will say this, which is interesting. Anna, you mentioned it. I think people that would look at this program or have somebody come, like Anna or somebody come out and look at your forest, you would be greatly surprised at what you've got out there. I was surprised. Yeah. I have harvested twice off of there. I've harvested walnuts off of there twice. And the forester pointed out to me that, I still have another harvest coming down the road. And I think people that, if they get a forester out, they'll be greatly surprised at the value that they have there. And it's well worth knowing that you're in a management program that you're going to be able to, work with, Yeah. Like Anna says, there's value out there.
So are you managing for both oak and black walnut, or strictly for black walnut?
I have a lot of bur oak. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. I've got a bunch of bur oak, which is pretty predominant in this area, and walnut. I've got strung in there, I've got some maple and some cherry in that we identified.
So you don't need to remove those in order to manage for those species?
No.
Okay.
Well, you might. I mean, it depends on the management plan, right? I mean,
Yep.
it depends on what the management goals are and what the plan is.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Randy?
One other question to follow up. Early on in the presentation, you mentioned open or closed, and I'm going to be
Yes.
naive here. Are there other classifications, and what kind of impact does that have on this program if it's open or closed? Can you elaborate on that, those definitions?
Sure. So let me just open means open to the public, closed means closed to the public. So open means you have to allow, pretty much the public to come onto your property and, let me make sure I don't misspeak here. And, okay. So, yes. So, you can restrict vehicle use on your property, but people can come on your property to hike, to hunt, to sightsee, to cross-country ski, to fish, and they don't need permission from the landowner. They can just come and do it if you're an open. If you're an open MFL, people can just come and use your property for those purposes, which may or may not fit into, your enjoyment of your property. If it's closed, that's not the case. If it's closed, then it's, private property, close to the public, as you see fit.
Just out of curiosity, what is one better over the other?
Well, you get a different tax rate depending on which one you choose.
And you don't know which one is greater than the other. I'm just
Well,
curious.
no, I mean, if you choose open, you're going to get a bigger tax rate.
Okay, all right.
Okay, anything else? Anything you wanted to add, Anna?
No, I mean, thanks for having me. I just wanted to point out that, MFL is, it's out there. It's a program that folks can participate in, but just make sure you look into it and know what you're getting into before you dive in with both feet.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and the presentation.
Of course, yes. If anyone has questions down the road, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to talk to whomever about whatever their questions might be.
Great. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to item 5B, which is ordinance 2021-0-12, an ordinance amending Chapter 22 zoning ordinance to amend Article V5, I assume, relative to permitted and conditional uses in ag zoning districts. I won't read the rest of this. I think you get the point. Wade?
My screen here. Oops. All right, so I'm going to work off the packet, and again, hopefully folks have had a chance to look at this, but basically what's happening right now is, the committee has spent months kind of making those draft zoning ordinance tweaks. In terms of process, we are now at what's called the referral process, so basically I packaged all those changes to council. They went to council about last month for what's called the referral process, which means it gets kicked out to relevant committees. They have a chance to weigh in on it with a recommendation. Those recommendations go back to council, and then council ultimately makes a decision. So there's two referring committees. There's this body and then Plan Commission, which will meet later tonight. So I just want to quickly, again, talk about what we're going to be making a recommendation on. I did make a few tweaks, and we'll talk about what those look like as well. So basically, the sheet in front of you, and I'm on page 7 of the packet. That's what's called a referral sheet. So that just basically gives a brief overview of what I just talked about. And then we have the resolution itself, and that is on page, just bear with me here, I guess it's page 12. And then you'll see an Exhibit A, which basically lists all those modifications that the committee discussed. So generally speaking, 99% of these changes are pretty solid and no real issues with. There is one change that I want to talk about, which staff actually made some additional tweaks to this proposed change after this committee recommended it. So that's what I will talk about now. So, and I'm on page 9 of the packet. So basically, the issue is related to rural event venue, and I think folks, we're pretty familiar with this concept. So essentially, the gist of it is, when we presented the initial changes to our departments for comment, our fire inspection folks and our building inspection folks had some concerns about the definition of rural event venue as construed by this committee. Basically, the issue was, if we want to allow for a new building as a rural event venue, we'd also talked about that new building being essentially an agricultural building, meaning potential for hay storage, potential for large machinery with big gas tanks. So as we presented that issue to those departments, they had real concerns about that. The gist of it being that having a traditional ag building also housing large public gatherings was a concern to those departments. So what staff did is essentially make a tweak to, we made a few tweaks. The first is we tweaked the definition of rural event venue based on those comments. So whereas before it talked about an agricultural building as a potential facility to also hold a rural event venue, we basically made that definition a little bit more in tune with those comments. So I'm on page 9 again, and that tweak essentially is the wording, an existing or new building of a traditional agrarian architectural style. So that language is in line with the comments from our departments, as I just mentioned. Another tweak we made is we modified the definition of ag entertainment to include education. So the idea is you can do ag entertainment, as we traditionally have talked about, but one additional example is the idea of classes. So maybe it's a gardening class or a farming class, but that would be considered part of this ag entertainment definition. And then the third change, I'm on page 10 of the packet, looking at letter C, and again, this is in green. So really what we're getting at here is, again, we're just talking new buildings that could serve as a rural event venue. So any new building that would serve as a rural event venue, previously we said it was just an agricultural building. It could house anything under the sun, hay storage, large equipment storage, those sorts of things. With this tweak, we are proposing that any new building that will house a rural event venue will also only house two types of ag uses: ag entertainment, as we've just discussed, or ag retail, meaning sale of raw, processed, or value-added ag products produced primarily on site. So again, previously we said a new building that could house a rural event venue could also house anything under the sun related to ag. With this change, we are saying that new building can only house, in addition to being a rural event venue, it can also only house ag entertainment and ag retail. And by having those two uses, that is our new definition of ag building as it relates to rural event venue. People with me so far? Okay. So just kind of wrapping that all up, I did put together a little bit of a clarification memo, or a clarification piece that you all have not seen, but I would like to just touch on that, and then we can open it up for questions and comments. So hopefully folks can see this on my screen. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. Let's see here. You don't have this. Yep, I got it. Okay, so hopefully folks can kind of see this. So this just kind of hopefully crystallizes a lot of what I just talked about. So again, we're only talking about new facilities to house rural event venues. So there was basically two issues that we were running into. The first is what I just mentioned, essentially public safety concerns with ag buildings, quote unquote, also housing large public gatherings. So as I mentioned, our fire and building folks had real concerns about permitting facilities for both large public gatherings, with these facilities also housing what I'll call unique fire hazards, i.e. hay, large equipment, fuel, et cetera, as would normally be seen in what I'll call a traditional agricultural building. So that's issue one. Issue two is basically an administration interpretation from a zoning perspective of what constitutes an ag building. Under that previous definition, it was pretty much anything under the sun. So again, a broad range of uses. It could be kind of an ag use broadly defined. It could be what's called ag accessory or ag related. And by leaving that definition of ag building so broadly defined, we really saw potential for creating ambiguity in the way we administer the ordinance. Basically, the issue would be what constitutes an ag building? Is it simply storage of a tractor? So we just had a lot of ambiguity in what that ag building definition meant. So as a result of issues 1 and 2, and basically I just kind of mentioned what we did, but we essentially created parameters for ag uses as it relates to a new building created as a rural event venue. So I did just talk about 1, 2, and 3. But again, just to summarize, we've made 3 tweaks, again, based on that feedback, based on those issues from what was originally discussed by this committee. So I removed ag building in terms of wording from our rural event venue definition, and we just kind of had some more generalized wording. As I mentioned, I added education to the ag entertainment definition. And then I think the most important thing here is we clarified required ag uses in a new rural event venue building as follows. Ag entertainment, with that definition tweaked as we just discussed. and then ag retail. So basically, the idea is if you grow and process something on site, you can sell it in your rural event venue, and that qualifies you as an ag building. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Again, we're not talking about existing buildings being converted to rural event venues. Nothing has changed there. We're simply talking about new buildings constructed for a rural event purpose. And if they are to have that purpose, staff is proposing an agricultural use in that building as we just identified. So I do want to clarify, again, the goal today is to get a recommendation to council and plan commission. I foresee three options. The committee can revert back to the original policy language. You can take staff's recommendation as just presented, or you can come up with something different. So those are the three options that I see before this committee.
So the original language essentially would conflict with the recommendation
Yeah,
of building and fire inspection.
correct. And I want to just reiterate the real concerns they had. At the end of the day, as city staff, we do as directed, and I'm sure there's a scenario where you could permit a traditional ag building as a rural event venue, but I think those departments saw real issues in doing that.
So I mean, I think we can understand their issues. The question is, when we talked about this before, if a new building were going up, we wanted it also to be for agricultural purposes. But understanding the feedback that we're getting, that's not going to work. So then the question really becomes, in my mind, do we even want a new building going up? And that's, I guess, option C would be to strip out a new building from this.
And again, just to clarify, staff's interpretation of agriculture is now what you see there under 3A and B. So I think Ed, when Ed's talking agriculture, he's talking to broadly, traditionally defined. When staff is talking agriculture, we're talking about 3A and B, just to clarify that, yep.
So I guess my take is, I just don't feel that us as committee members are really in any position to disagree with what, like, the fire is saying. I mean, if I have an emergency, like, I need them. Like, we need to not disagree with their recommendations. I guess I have to take their recommendation. That's my input.
Randy?
No, I fully understand, Amy, what you're stating, but just take it a step further. Based on the proposed solution, you reference ag retail, in parentheses, grown or processed on site. So it could still be a new building as long as with all of the code, meeting all of the codes that are set by the fire department, city of Fitchburg. But if they grow hops on the property, does that meet the criteria then?
So one example I will use is apple garden. So one scenario could be, it's an apple orchard, right?
Right.
They process their apple cider and then sell it in this facility.
Yeah.
That would meet the definition of ag retail, grown or processed on site.
It's a new facility, it would still meet the requirements that,
And if they're doing something with a refinement of hops or some sort of, I mean, I guess it could be a raw commodity that's being sold. But yes, that's the gist of it.
as long as it's not a standalone new building and nothing else is taking place other than for the pure sake of having it as a venue. I mean, they must adhere to the original idea of ag and rural.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So
And I would point out, there's precedent in the city, not for new facilities that meet 3A and B, but if you think about Mackenzie Barn, which was a retrofit, but they're doing
Correct.
essentially ag entertainment, that's how they qualify as an ag building. I haven't been out to Apple Garden in years, but, again, that was an existing building, but I believe at one point they sold apples or cider or something out of that barn, so, yep.
Okay.
I have a question about, is the big issue here with tractor storage? You know, with a tractor with fuel in it?
I mean, the example
I mean-
Fire gave was hay.
What's it?
The example the fire department gave was hay storage,
Hay storage.
just the level of combustibility
Okay,
of that. But I think just broader, the idea of agricultural being an industry, quote unquote, with everything that goes along with it, machinery and commodities, and just not being real compatible with
having
with
it
having
on
a
this,
facility for public gatherings.
well, yeah, having it on the same property, or, I can see the same building, the issue.
The concern, no, in the same building.
Yeah,
That was the
absolutely.
concern.
But I mean, they still could have, a hay barn with the tractors in it and have a retrofit barn,
Correct.
Yeah, so that
for
would be.
entertainment and,
Right, that wouldn't be new construction. So this, the issue here is really
it would have to be a retrofit.
round up, what do the purposes need to be for it to be allowed here? You could still take an old hay barn and retrofit it and use it for this purpose, which is what happened on the McKenzie property.
Right.
That's a different matter. The question is,
But
do we want to allow ground-up construction of a new building for the purpose of ag entertainment and an event venue? Would we view a processing plant as being different, as being something that maybe is more needed for agriculture than entertainment? I guess that's my question. I have a little trouble with
Well, I
a new
think,
building going up for the purpose of, someone says, well, it's gonna be ag entertainment and an event venue. Okay, basically, it's an event venue. That's what it is. And to me,
there's a fine line.
that type of thing should be done in the urban service area.
It just seems like there should be a way to make that work, as long as it's, even if there's barn beams brought in, but you're saying just because they're putting it from the ground up?
But
They've moved barns, that's about as close as you can get from starting over with
Sure.
an old barn, but, it's ground-up construction. It just seems like there should be a way to retrofit it, that's my opinion, as long as it's done, to meet the right standards.
Well, again, retrofitting an existing barn isn't the issue that's being raised here. It's building a new building.
Okay.
But that goes back to my original point. If it's a new building and they're growing crops or hops or crops, but something that's taking place on that property, would that would fit the criteria?
Clarification, so there's two things going on here. There's a use of the building itself, and there's a use of the surrounding land.
Right.
The surrounding land still needs to qualify as what's called a farm or agriculture. So that's not the issue. Land use for agriculture is still required. What we're really talking about is use of the building, and more specifically, a new building. So regardless of any scenario, for this to happen, this building needs to be part of a broader farm, meaning the majority of land use is agriculture. But what we're really talking, and that's not changing, what we're talking about is potentially changing the use requirements of a new building. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's where I thought when we talked before that I thought that we did not want a new building unless it is for a true agricultural purpose. And what we're being told is there's conflicts, and maybe not for processing, but there's conflicts for a lot of things that we would think of, whether it's hay storage, equipment storage, whatever it might be. There's conflicts we probably want to avoid.
Yeah.
And so, I guess we need to kind of define, all right, well, if it's a new building going up and it's going to be used as a rural event venue, what other legitimate purposes do we think it should be serving? Or do we care? Are we fine with new buildings going up strictly to serve as event venues? Because that's what you got when you have a combination of ag entertainment and a rural event venue. That's what you've got. Something that really is not an agricultural building.
So how do we avoid that, Ed?
Yeah, I thought we were avoiding that, but I understand what staff is saying is that, okay, there's a problem here. If you really are legitimately trying to build a hay barn that you also want to use for this purpose, they got fire concerns.
There's-
And
yeah.
that's understandable.
Understandable.
So you find an old barn and you retrofit
One
it,
or the other.
Yeah, you can still do that, right. I
like
mean,
the Mackenzie farm.
if this language wasn't in here, anyone could still do that. Yep.
And I think it's pretty clear. We've been given directions that's different than our original thinking. And I believe that this type of agricultural enterprise is well worth us continuing the way we're going as a new building with ag entertainment and ag retail as the definition of an ag building. We have no choice, but I have no problem, I, for one, have no problem with that. I think this is a great way to bring together people to understand a rural environment at events like this. It's a form of, if you want, almost like tourism in a way. And I think we ought to just move ahead and accept what we've got right here. That's where we're at, and I think we'll be pleased with it if we see the results of it.
Okay. Anyone else or any further discussion? We did have one person who registered in support of this, Sean Paff, 5843 Schuman Drive. Registered in support, feels it would be a great addition to Fitchburg.
I'd like to move that we accept the new definition of ag building as proposed by staff.
Second.
Let's get a, Wade, if we can, roll call vote on this.
And if I could just clarify, maybe the motion could be a motion to recommend approval of all changes as presented by staff.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah,
Okay, Wade, can we get a roll call?
Roll call, let's see, alphabetical, that would be, Roger Cohy,
yes.
Ed Kinney,
No.
Amy Johanning. No. George Vroman,
Aye.
Randy Udell.
Aye.
And do we have Scott on the line, on Zoom? So that's the only 5 members in attendance, correct? So I've got 3 yeses and 2 nos.
Is 3 votes sufficient to pass with quorum?
Believe so.
Okay. All right, in that case, motion passes. All right. The next item on the agenda is the rural broadband update.
Roger?
No, you go
You and
ahead.
I, we're up.
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
I'm not sure where to start. When the last time we met, Roger and myself have been attending workshops with city staff and regarding broadband expansion into the rural area. We have had a presentation from Mad Rep, and they're working with Neo Networks, and it was an excellent presentation on providing rural broadband out into the rural area, the expansion. And however, before moving forward, the committee thought that we should have some data and exactly what is provided, what is provided, and what type of coverage, and so forth. And I don't know, I don't have a survey. We sent out a survey to all of the residents of the rural area, and I don't have a survey with me. I don't know if you have one, Wade?
Not with me, no.
No, okay. But I know a number of members here have spoken highly of that survey, and we do have quite a few surveys back, at least when we gave an update to the Mayor Richardson, and City Administrator Chad Brecklin last week. So the big question now is compiling that information once the survey closes, and I believe it closes on the 24th. And then that we leave that into Wade's hands at this point, as he smiles. And we're looking at maybe around September 1st to have that information. I think that was the date that we agreed upon. And then we'll have some good data at that point, and we can begin to move forward as to how we will, with a plan, to execute that plan into the rural area, or maybe other parts of the city as well. But our number one mission is the rural at this point in time. Roger, would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think as a committee here, anytime you're talking to your neighboring landowners, you might ask them if they've gotten the survey and encourage them, if they have not, to fill it out. And if they have gotten it and they don't understand it or something along those lines or anything, try to help them. The more we get in, the better feel we'll have when we put this information together to go after a grant. That's the big push here, is that we want to tap into some of this money that we've all heard about. And quite frankly, we think that we will well qualify. So, but just hearing from people is most important.
I would agree that the more information we receive back, the more data we have.
Yeah.
It just works in our favor. And I will say, I don't know what numbers we have back at this point, but we do have a significant stack at this point. So there's been a good response, which I'm very pleased about.
I think we sent out about, someplace in the neighborhood of 300.
Right, yeah.
And we've got, 300 and some went out, and we've gotten about a third of them back already.
I think it was more like 900, Roger.
Was it 900?
It was quite a bit. Yeah, it was pretty, anyone that lives in outside the urban service.
Around 900, I think there was.
Oh, okay, I thought.
So the 300 is probably the third that you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Nope, that's all right.
Yeah, but, well, that's a good start, but we sure need to promote it.
Once we have all that data, we'll have further discussions here with this committee, and it'll go through the normal process and ultimately to.
And I'll just make a plug, if residents
Yes.
are listening and they want to complete that survey, I would encourage online submittal. It'll make staff's job a lot easier, but certainly we can take paper copies as well.
As long as they have internet.
Exactly. They can do it at work, whatever, yeah.
Right, I know.
How did the survey go out?
Just a mailer.
Mailer with a return envelope.
I don't,
You didn't get one?
no, I don't think so. And I'm wondering if did you get one, Amy? You got one?
Yeah.
Everybody else get one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, send it right back.
Oh, maybe Jackie just filled it out and sent it back. I don't know.
Either that or you thought it was from me.
Not if it was from you, Roger. No, we're not really off the grid. All right, thanks for the update. Any questions or anything else on that topic?
Thank you guys for working on this. It's a really good project. I was so thrilled to see the survey arrive in the mail. I was like, good work.
I have to give a big shout out to city staff, though. I mean, Joyce Fry and Matt Prow and Wade and Jeremy Crosby. I mean, they have worked very hard and spent a lot of time pulling this together.
Thank you all
Yeah.
for caring.
Oh, we hope it comes together.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Report from department.
Yeah, just quickly, I do want to mention, if folks remember our ag plan, we do have one action item in there that kind of promotes this idea of a park space in the city devoted to agriculture, whether it be education or interpretive opportunities, community gardens, that sort of thing. So I just want to let the committee know we are working with the developer in Terra Vesa, the new development in the northeast part of our city, on potentially developing an ag park in that development. I think it's a really cool idea. It's kind of an innovative park idea. I think it really, kind of reflects Fitchburg's ag history. So I think there's a lot of cool aspects to it. So I will probably continue to update this committee on that project. And at some point, we'll probably give you kind of a full-on presentation of what that could look like. We're in the very early planning stages, a lot of things to figure out yet. But if we can make this happen, I think it'd be a great addition to our park system and also really reflect well in agriculture in the city. So
Is the school involved with that?
Not at this point, but certainly if, again, if we're able to implement it, I could see a lot of opportunities for programming out there, education opportunities. So, yeah.
Great, great. I got a little update on Lake Barney. We had a meeting the other day, and we haven't talked about that in a while, but I'll just let you know kind of where that's at. The good news is the lake itself is down somewhere between 30 and 40 inches from its peak, which is tremendous. Obviously, this has been a much drier year, and last year was dry enough too that it had gone down some, but it's gone down a lot recently. And the belief is that the groundwater is dropping in the area as well, because when we do get rains in some of those lower areas, it's now soaking in instead of ponding up. So good news in that respect. The village has put down some gravel with fines on top of it over the portion of the bike path that had been underwater. So that bike path is again usable, and that would keep it above water. And if there's an event where the lake needs to drain out some, they'll take out a chunk of it where the water had crossed at one point to allow that to happen. But otherwise, they have a usable bike path again, which is great. Kind of the bad news on this is that most of the path, the route that would likely be used to ditch, to drain Lake Barney down through the village of Oregon is probably going to be delineated as wetlands, which means it's going to be more difficult, more expensive, if even possible to do. They don't know yet what that situation is. The village itself has some ditching planned in Lerner Park, which is an area that they need to be able to drain, but this would also have to drain through eventually if there is a system that is built out. Their timeline is working on it over the winter and next spring with a second phase of some sort. I'm not sure what that is next summer. So that's kind of, a year away for that to be completed, and that would be something that would have to be done before anything else is done. Fitchburg, it's in the CIP, but it's down the road. I mean, we've got money for wetland delineation in 2023, planning and bidding 2024 and 2025 construction. So if anything can be done based on the delineation, it's going to be a ways off. So that's kind of the status of the project, but at least the lake is not the problem that it was in the past. The farmers reported that they're not having the water issues. And the one resident who's almost surrounded by water down there is taking out those blue dikes and hoping he doesn't have to put them back in again. So we'll see.
Well, it's a good project.
Yep. Randy?
In some of my conversations, at least with Claudia, and you can help clarify, we have some drier weather, the lake recedes, and everybody's happy again. Is this, I'm hoping that this is a project that will not just fall off the radar then? I mean, because I'm assuming this is secular, and with other large rainfalls. I mean, is this something that would continue, or really does that depend upon council?
It really depends. Well, it'll depend on a couple things. First off, on what the DNR says with regard to the delineation and what they're going to require from a mitigation standpoint and what the costs would be. But then once that information is known, yeah, it depends on council keeping with a timeline and not pushing it back like you guys love to do in CIP.
Sure.
Well, with your balanced budget concerns and all of these things,
Right. A lot of that work, though, is really outside of the city of Fitchburg, though, is it not? As far as that,
Yeah, there's a fair amount that would go through the town.
Yeah.
And then eventually through the village and across, private property as well. And everyone seems to be working together on this. The DNR, they got on board a little bit late, and they're more of the roadblock.
okay.
But surprisingly, considering that you've got a number of different landowners, you have 4 municipalities, you have Fish and Wildlife land, you have State Department of Corrections land, all of those people are on the same page of trying to get this resolved, which is a great example of communities working together. It really is. But unfortunately, the DNR came wait a minute, just 1 minute, you know, and they're throwing up the roadblocks. So we'll see how it goes.
They are just roadblocks, though. You don't believe it. They're just, we still have the options of moving forward. We just have to work within their guidelines, I'm guessing.
It could become more expensive than, it may be a decision as to whether it's worth spending that kind of money, because if they determine that there is a lot of wetland that has to be disturbed or changed in order to ditch this through, then you have wetland mitigation. You're getting into some very, very big costs. So, no, there is a real possibility that the cost will be very high and that there'll have to be some sort of a determination made as to whether or not it's worth doing. And of course, there are different options as to what can be done too. I think everyone kind of sees one particular option as being the most likely one and not the most expensive one. But, you know, whether it's affordable or not, we just
Right.
won't know for a while.
Right.
Quite a while, I guess, unfortunately. So that's Lake Barney. Any announcements? Okay, and so do we have anything coming up that we need to schedule a meeting for?
I don't believe so. So yeah, we can just kind of play it by ear, and then if something comes in, we can get something scheduled. Or if you want to set something for a few months out, just as kind of a placeholder, we could,
As a placeholder?
yeah, either way.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing in the foreseeable future.
Well, why don't we plan on skipping August then? And,
September comes up, we'll have all the data from the survey on broadband.
oh, okay. And when do you expect to have that? Like early September?
I do. I'm looking over at
Yeah,
Wade right now.
I think we
The
discussed
pressure's on.
an early September deadline. That may, to be honest, I will do my best to make that, but we'll see. So maybe come mid to late August, I can just reach out to you all and let you know. I mean, I think a September, October meeting would be, we could get that on the books now if you want.
Okay, so September, October, we'll see where we're at with that data and whether anything else comes up.
We should probably clarify. Would you like to speak to it all as far as the data collection? I mean, it's more than just sitting there and
Yeah.
marking ticks on a piece of paper.
And that's where I wasn't quite, and we can discuss internally, Randy, or with staff, but I wasn't quite clear on why we have a September 1st deadline, you know, if there's no immediate grant apps or whatever, but that, we can discuss that in our work group.
All right.
But yeah, essentially what we're gonna do is take the surveys and map the data. Try to figure out what kind of story we wanna tell with the mapping, you know, in terms of gaps in service or, you know, hot spots, cold spots, whatever you wanna call them. So essentially, it's a mapping exercise, and that entails, literally manual data entry as the first step, and then mapping. And the third step is, what is the story we wanna tell with the mapping? So yeah, those are all the pieces that we're working on, and once we get those figured out, we'll present it and talk next steps, so.
Well, let's pencil in then the third Tuesday in September at the same time at 4:00.
Sure.
And between now and then, we'll figure out whether it's happening
Yep.
then or in October.
I got one more thing, Ed.
21st? Okay, thanks.
I got something.
Yeah,
We, as a committee, we might want to start thinking about a landowners meeting that we've had in the past. And I think they've been very, very well received. We had it all lined up last year, then we had to cancel it the last minute. But as a committee, I think we ought to be thinking about when we would want to do it, what kind of format we would want, and also location. So those will be some things that are down the line. Maybe as we get in our September meeting, it would be good to start to really get a little serious about that, because you have to, ideally, it has to be after the harvest and before the holidays. There's a window there that kind of that has worked in the past.
so before the holidays or after? I
Yeah,
think we did
well,
it 1
we
year in
can have it after too, but,
February or whatever. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I think traditionally, we've done it early part of the year.
Yeah.
February, March, and of course, we can deviate from that, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, well, let's, put that on the agenda for planning at whatever the next meeting is.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We didn't need a roll call on that. Thanks.